All right, hi, whoa. That's loud. Okay, we're going to be loud tonight.
There we go.
All right, hi everyone. I am Eric Palmer. I run the writing group here at the Phoenixville Library. We meet the second Thursday and third Tuesday of every month. So if you like what you hear tonight and want to get a little more critique, we're happy to have new members. There's some flyers over there in the back next to the cookies and lemonade and all the other delicious things Mark put out, as well as some books for sale from some readers tonight. So we are going to go through this fairly quickly. Everyone knows, I hope they have 5 minutes. We're going to be kind of hard and fast with that because we've had some overages in the past. We actually workshop the most annoying sound we can make when your 5 minutes are up. So when you hear this little ditty, it'll get louder. There we go.
Oh, okay,
That'll do. Try and wrap up. All right, so tonight, as always, they put me in charge, so I'm going to abuse that privilege and go ahead and put myself first. And after that, we're just going to go alphabetically by first name, so hopefully you know where you fall in the alphabet. Be prepared. All right, and just to show everything is fair, I'm also giving myself 5 minutes. And if I get cut off, I guess rotten fruit. Good luck. I can dodge though, so. I first saw her in a pretty blue dress, walking effortlessly and missing every single crack in the dilapidated city sidewalk. I watched her from my seat at the cafe as she moved. And it wasn't the long red hair streaming behind her that captivated me, or her face, absently half smiling, as if that was the way her expression rested when she wasn't thinking of anything in particular. It was her walk. It couldn't be intentional. She wasn't looking at the ground. Wherever her feet landed, cracks weren't. I don't know why I noticed in the first place. Just lucky, I guess. I was looking down, trying not to look like a creep for staring, and saw her stepping in the only whole part of the cement square in a spiderweb of cracks in front of me. Just big enough for her small foot in bright white sneakers. A stepping stone in the sea of brokenness around her. That perfection captivated me, and I watched her as she went past, waiting for that perfection to break. But it never did. I abandoned my coffee, half drunk, and stumbled out into the street just before she disappeared around the corner. I followed. How could I do anything but follow? Either this perfect fleeting spell would end with an accidental step on a crack, or I would follow her to the ends of the earth. One or the other. I ran to the cross street where I'd spotted her, quickly enough to see the top of her head bobbing halfway down the block, my view of her feet blocked by other pedestrians. But after I waited a despairing moment, the pedestrians parted enough for me to dart down the mass of humanity and catch up. I got close and slowed, happy again to be able to watch her walk. Her feet kept up their dance, the cracks refused to find her. Every step was measured, there was no stuttering in her footfalls. Her stride was just long enough that it felt exactly where the sidewalk was whole. Beautiful. I followed her for blocks, and noticed other things. Lights were ready to change at her approach. She never stopped and waited at a crosswalk. No one got in her way. Even the beggars never accosted her, but she still tipped a handful of change in their shaking cups as she passed. The city shifted to accommodate her. Lost in the magic, I followed, forgetting about my lost job, my lost romance, my lost youth, how I was about to be kicked out of my apartment unless I found something with a paycheck today, how I shouldn't have wasted that $5 on a cup of coffee. But if I hadn't, the other option was taking that $5 and bribing a security guard to let me take an elevator to the top of one of the city skyscrapers, then jumping off. All of that just fell away, leaving only this strange girl's footsteps to echo in my brain as I trailed behind her. I would follow her forever and not care in the slightest. Except that she stopped, suddenly, without warning, in the middle of the sidewalk. When I tried to catch myself as well, a man bumped against my back and sent me off balance, tumbling, wide-eyed towards her. I expected to fall right through her, but she was solid, and so was I. She stumbled, taking a step forward. I gasped as I tried to straighten up, getting my feet under me. My arm darted out of its own accord and grabbed her elbow, keeping her from lowering that foot, hovering dangerously over a giant crevice in the sidewalk. The city continued to bustle around us, but my whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see if the bubble would shatter. I stared at her foot, willing to come down anywhere but that damning crack. It hovered there, inches away from ruining everything. And then I heard her clear her throat. I looked up to find her watching me, one delicate eyebrow raised. My hand, I realized, was still holding onto her elbow. She probably thought I was a pervert, an elbow pervert. Before I could try to understand what exactly an elbow pervert was, I yanked my hand away, and, to my relief, that foot lowered, not on the crack, but just to the left, safely perfect. "Excuse me," I stammered out. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." She just shrugged. "It happens. Are you okay?" Her voice was low but carried, even with the sound of 100 other pedestrians around us. It sent a chill up the base of my spine, like tiny fingers were working their way up the vertebrae, delicate but ready to snap the bones beneath them if called upon. "I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" My mind was racing, trying to think up a way to keep her here, keep her talking to me. But there was nothing. "I'm okay. Have a good one." And she was gone, melting into the people, her red hair weaving and bobbing through a sea of blonde, brunette, and bald. The spell was broken. I couldn't follow now. She knew my face. But even as she went, I was sure that she still avoided every crack. The light changed to let her cross away from me. All right, thank you very much. Up first, did not plan it this way, but this is a member of our group. I'm reading bios. Mark may have shortened your bio, so if you are missing something when I read it aloud, blame him, not me. Please. If there are two types of people in the world, Alex Whitehall probably isn't one of them, despite being a person. Their favorite pastimes include reading, horseback riding, sleeping, watching geek-tastic television, knitting, eating, and running, and wasting time on the internet. They can be found blogging, reading, and tending after their aloe plants. Alex.
All right. Hello. I'll be reading from my book, Magic Runs Deep. Chapter 1. The heady aroma of destruction hung in the air. Smoke wafted through the throne room, carrying undercurrents of blood and charred flesh. The noise beyond the heavy wooden doors was terrific, but inside the stone walls, only Bora's growls and the clink of his chains broke the silence. Bora's nose twitched as the side door to the throne room swung open. Briefly, screams, shouts, and the clash of metal echoed off the hollowed walls. They were silenced by the door clanging closed behind the Almighty and his council. Bora rose to his feet so he could properly bow his head. The Almighty had left earlier in the day with his council, talking of barbarians attacking, but Bora had remained chained to the Almighty's throne. Despite being the Almighty's protector, he was never set free to prove his worth. They feared giving him freedom, afraid a bear would turn his claws and teeth on the Almighty's people, or the Almighty, as if he would attack his creator who loved him. The Almighty hurried across the room, clearly focused on his councilman. "My liege," Lord Gore urged, right on the Almighty's heels. "If you leave through the kitchens, no one will be on guard. We can dress you as a servant, and our fleeing will not draw their attention. The right hand can cause a diversion, and—" "No," the Almighty said. "I will leave as my position warrants, on my horse with my things. I will not sneak away from my own palace." But the Almighty's fist cut the air. "Silence! You will either help me or be considered a traitor. Now, to the rooms!" The door on the other side of the room slammed closed behind the Almighty and his entourage. Stillness settled around Bora for a moment. He waited on tenterhooks for something, anything, but there was nothing. He was about to hunch back down when the main doors opened and a flood of invaders poured in. Swords drawn and bloody, their armor oddly shaped and scarred, they stank of strangeness and destruction. Bora roared and surged forward, only taking a few strides before the chain ran out of length and the attached collar choked him to a stop. The metal dug into his neck and cut off the noise, but it didn't matter. The men who charged in pulled up short and turned to face him, clearly recognizing him as the threat he was. Perhaps not as large as other of his bear brethren, but on all fours he was nearly to their waists, and larger still if he rose on his hind legs, not to mention the sheer heft of his weight. One of the men cursed in the common tongue, and then the rest of the words were lost in a foreign babble. Bora watched their gestures and yanked hard against the chain, snapping his jaw at the air, daring them to come closer. Even if he could not fight them, he could distract them from their prey. He lunged again. The chain held strong, but the throne he was tied to screeched as it slid an inch across the floor. Now they watched him. He pulled again, and another squeal of metal pierced the air. The first man gestured and spoke in their strange language, then turned across the room. The others joined him, heading toward the door the Almighty had taken. A few heads turned at his warning roar, but it didn't stop the soldiers from breaking down the door and following the Almighty's path up the staircase beyond it. And then the men were gone, and for a moment, silence hung in the air again. Too soon, more men came, all strangers, all battle-worn, all yelling in a confusing language, gesturing, giving orders, taking orders, and then dispersing. Most startled at him when they first arrived, but few stayed except a handful of common soldiers, their armor dull and ill-fitting at best. One man, boasting about his own greatness, Bora could tell, although the words were meaningless, approached with a spear. He stank of sweat, filth, and pride. Bora snarled and hunched to the ground, then slowly slid backward to slacken the chain. The man sneered and thrust the spear at him. Bora fell back farther, luring the savage in closer to the throne. When the man advanced and thrust a second time, Bora leapt. He'd spaced it right. The chain pulled taut, but he had already felled his foe, small bones crunching beneath his weight. Screams echoed in the large hall when his claws dug in. A single swipe of his paw, and there was victorious silence. Shouts and cries from the other soldiers echoed in the hall, but it was too late. He'd made his point. After that, the rest of the invaders left him alone. He crouched beside the corpse and snarled when anyone came near, but they kept outside the length of his chain, eyeing him and his prize warily. Bora returned his thoughts to the Almighty, praying for his safety, and then he felt it, a loosening. He shuffled, grumbling, and stood, then shook out his body. The feeling stayed. It sprouted between his shoulders like an itch that didn't itch, and spread through his forepaws, down his spine, along his hindquarters, and into his brain, until the collar around his neck was only metal, a weight bearing him down. Gateways in his mind opened, and he shook again, trying to dislodge the new feelings, but they overwhelmed and settled into him. Disgust, hatred, anger.
All right, thank you, Alex. Her books are for sale back there. I've been informed they are actually for cheaper than the cover price. They are $15 instead of the normal $16.99. So pick them up at that price while you can. All right, up next is Carolyn Cott. She's been a professional writer-editor for corporations, nonprofits, universities, and individuals for 3 decades. She's also a creative writer, formerly of short stories and currently a novel. Carolyn is reading a short segment from the novel she keeps editing and re-editing. I'll have another one, please. Carolyn.
This is chapter 20. It's a short one. The Long Walk Home. What was it about that night that made all the difference to me? Was it the fireflies in the blue twilight and the easy touch of his hand? Was it the backdrop of my eroding marriage off in the near distance? Was it the lure of something just out of reach? There, along that rural road, something shifted in me that cascaded over the next 2 years into changes I did not foresee. John. In my mind's eye, I pictured him lean-bodied and familiar, gazing across the twinkling meadow. He had the inheld strength of a resting panther. He could read things about me that no man had. He could connect with an intensity that could be addictive. To be so seen, so known, how could I live without him? At the end of our twilight walk, John had looked into my eyes, touched my arm lightly, and we parted. It was a long walk back into my own world. In the weeks that followed that evening, I descended into a depth of longing no wife should have for a man other than her husband. When Aaron returned home from Brussels, I made a dinner I thought he would enjoy. He rearranged his food around the plate and hardly talked, but the children filled in the silence. Did they notice his distance? The next morning, Aaron begged off going for a walk by the river with us, saying he was too tired and had too much paperwork. The girls and I went, walking as far as their little legs would carry them until they complained. We picnicked at the river's edge, watched a family of ducks, and picked wildflowers. Later, when the girls settled down for their afternoon naps, I stood at the door of Aaron's den. "What?" he said, looking up. "Nothing," I replied, "just saying hello." I twisted a curl around my finger. "Hello," he said. Hello. He turned toward his computer and was gone. I sat on the porch and peered into the woods to all the shades and textures of green. I inhaled the scent of mown lawn and listened to the birds, a sharp chirp, an insistent call, a meandering melody. Then I voiced to myself what I had not let myself fully articulate before. I do not want to spend the rest of my life with my husband, and because of the children, I cannot leave. Honesty brought as much relief as sadness. I sat staring for a long time. I ran a finger under my eyelashes, drying the vestiges of tears, collected myself with a sigh, and turned once again toward my life. In the months that followed that firefly dusk with John, Aaron might have sensed some shift in me and wrongly construed it as contentment. I was resigned, not contented, but resignation did have elements of peace. I focused on my children more, their sudden laughter, their large and short-lived dramas. They were unknowing saviors to me. Sometimes, though, when my daughters were sleeping, I experienced intense yearning for John and felt the loss of what I had never had. Seeking distraction, I decided to create an immense woodlands garden behind my house. On the first day, I stood daunted at the center of an ambitious expanse of soil that I'd carted there, pushing against the wheelbarrow at a 45-degree angle. Then I put my fingers into the dirt and began creating something beautiful. When I had finished, stone pathways and flows of plants meandered and blurred the boundary between the cultivated and the wild. In the spring, drifts of daffodils curved through the woods and garden. On summer mornings, I sat on a shady bench and drank coffee while the children played. Aaron engaged in our family life as much as he wanted to, which was fitfully and over time less often. I told myself, I can live with this. At least he gives me space. One summer night, I sat alone on the porch listening to the crickets. My mind eased into a restful indifference of all my concerns. I began to understand that all of my wants, all of my passions really didn't matter. They didn't matter at all.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. This has gotten low. All right, up next is Chris Bauer. He is a Philly native and the author of the crime thriller Jane's Baby, release date June 1st. His short fiction has appeared in Thug Lit and Shroud magazine. He likes pie.
Thank you. Jane's Baby answers the what-if question, whatever happened to Jane Roe's baby of Roe v. Wade landmark Supreme Court decision fame. Here we see the protagonist, bounty hunter, and an ornery sports writer, both with major baggage, take measure of each other after getting tossed out of a football stadium for fighting. Judge checked his canine deputies, gave him quick walks, returned to the stadium staff exit where the security guard had deposited him. He dropped his butt on a chilly aluminum bench, leaning away from the tender spot where the taser probes had connected. The autumn night wasn't getting its due, the stars losing out the blazing stadium lights that at 2 a.m. blasted the heavens with searchlight equivalent candle power. 10 minutes later, his eyes still on the exit, he started thinking this was a waste of time. He played with his phone, read a text from his employer. School teacher was more than a pill popper. It was the only charge that stuck. Got 2 addresses for you. One was an apartment address in a Dallas suburb. The other was for a trailer park in Glen Heights, a half hour from Arlington. She skipped bail, but who skips bail for possession of bogus prescriptions? It had to be for something far more serious. Stadium lights dimmed to half strength. The floodlighting for the staff exit in front of him switched off. The alleyway from the exit went dark, turned opaque black, thick and heavy as a stage curtain, except they still had a volunteer from the audience backstage in the bowels of the stadium somewhere. Then, showtime. His assailant stumbled out of the darkness and fell onto all fours. No black sequined hat, but the rest of his cowboy outfit was intact. He struggled to his feet, brushed himself off, then swept a tangle of black and gray dreads out of his eyes. At full height, in his cowboy boots, he was at best 4'8". The boots had spurs, something the judge had missed earlier, was thankful he hadn't learned about them the hard way. The little guy squinted, the bright light from an overhead lamppost offending his previously light-deprived vision, or maybe his hangover. A tossed black hat split the darkness from behind, spinning out to hit him in the back of the head. He wobbled, picked it up, and dented its 10-gallon top before he placed it on his head. A slight tug on the brim just above his forehead snugged it up. Calm and looking unfazed, his squint got more severe as Judge approached. Judge was calmer too, now that he saw that security hadn't maimed or killed the guy. They assessed each other. Owen Winger, Dallas Morning News sports writer. One hell of a fight, right? One hell of a fight. Gunnery Sergeant Judge Drury, Marine Corps, former enlisted. Bare-knuckled combatants always shared a certain post-fight camaraderie. Judge learned this growing up on the Philly streets, where fistfights were common, even between best friends. Owen spoke again. I appreciate what you did for me tonight, you going all superhero on them. No one's ever jumped in like that before. Wasn't needed, but I appreciate it. Certainly looked like you needed it. They were zapping you pretty good with those tasers. They know when to stop. I don't, but they do. Sorry about the groin shot. You left yourself open. I didn't leave myself open. I was surrendering to security. Hands up means white flag, no moss. No such thing as surrender for guys like me. Surrender only means getting a worse beating. They began their trek to the far reaches of the parking lot. So it's Tourette's, Owen said. Yep, sometimes the medication works, sometimes it doesn't, like tonight. How the hell did they let you in the Marines? A direct SOB, Judge had to give him that. Friends in high places, he said. Better word might have been acquaintances. Specifically, Judge's U.S. Senator father was responsible, but he was never a friend. Best word, a male body part. Owen, late 30s or early 40s, Judge guessed, seemed easygoing enough and well-adjusted, so Judge went for cute, addressing the other elephant in the room. So it's dwarfism then. Close enough, Owen said, staying deadpan. Midget's more accurate. My affliction's medicated too. Pulled out a flask, took a hit. Medication success rate 100%, as long as I stay that way. He offered Judge some, but he declined. Owen took another hit, then got panicky. Damn it, what time is it? I've got a column to write. Judge checked his phone. 2:45. You all right getting home by yourself? I could use a lift, he said. I have no idea where I left my horse. That's it.
All right, thank you, Chris. Up next is Chris Wilhelm. He is a sophomore at Phoenixville High School. He enjoys music and art and loves to walk his hometown of Phoenixville. Chris.
All right, thank you. I have a couple short poems I'm going to read here. And the first one is called Phoenixville. All right. 16,000 residents. Once home to a steel mill, then became a hull to refill. Once called Manavine, now called Phoenixville. Its buildings made of brick and stone, its streets long and narrow. Trains pass in and out, day and night. Movies watched at the good old Colonial. Phoenixville, what we see is what's inside. All right, next one. We're not quite done yet. All right, next one, called Walk. One day, I took a walk downtown, passing by all of the sights and sounds. I walked on the Schuylkill Trail, going into a building that was old and frail. Walked on the old bridge where trains once carried supplies from and back to town. I walked to the park where people's dogs would bark. 10,000 steps was my goal, but after it was accomplished, I just kept walking. All right, the next one. These are very short poems, by the way. All right, time flies. I sat in my room thinking about the past, and I thought, oh man, things have gone so fast. I wondered if I could go back in time, but I realized that being in the present was just as fine. Time flies when I'm having fun. Time flies when I go for a run. And time flies when I make up a pun. All right, the last one here, called Don't Look Away. There comes a time when you look down. You always seem to have a frown. You might not want to talk, so maybe you should take a walk. Don't look away from your fears, even if you try to cover your ears. That's it.
All right, thank you, Chris. Up next is Christine Emmert. She is an actress, writer, director, and educator. She works throughout the Northeast region in all capacities. Her novel, The Nun's Dragon, can be found on Amazon in Kindle and hard copy. Presently, she's working on 2 plays for the 365 Women a Year project and preparing a lecture on Shakespeare's Ladies for Rosemont College. You can find her blog at christineemmert.wordpress.com. Christine.
I too am reading poetry. 4 poems. Drunk on moonshine. The moon lifts me up just for a sip, and then I'm spinning through space on the taste of it. That old jug carried by the water maidens and filled to the brim at the great night's edge, where the moon leans down to scoop me. Jiggling stars and woolly comfort of clouds. It is as ever the moon and I drinking partners on any winter night. In the summer he ignores me, holding court over brightly lit banquets where wine quenches the palate. Some nights I can brew my own drunkenness, but I'd rather drink in the moonshine of winter. Okay. Thank you. Black dog days and white cat nights. The bite it took, the meat of me it shook in tight jaws, sending pain through every vein and bleeding the joy away. Rabbit dog, who cornered me in sunshine gardens and devoured me again and again, in the tunnel of his angry growl. I had met this dog before, but then the moon rose and the light died, and the only brilliance left in the sky was a white cloud that spread itself out as a cat. I heard the horror of his growl become a purr. He opened his jaws, releasing me into moonlit gardens, an old scene made new again. Okay, and this is not my dog that I own. This is Winston Churchill's dog, these black dogs. Okay. Okay, not my love story. This is to embarrass my husband, who's sitting over here. I cry for Juliet and Ophelia, and even ghost lovers who walk the moors. But their story is not mine. My story is too happy, too perfect, not narrated in tears, but in years of contentment. Poetry that embroiders the borders is not made of wild stitches, When I think of Cleopatra holding an asp to her arm while eternity yawns, it will not be the ending to my tale. And how did I arrive here at such peaceful oasis? My early life did not prepare me for anything save asylums. All young lovers think of joy as conclusion, save myself. I foresaw endings and partings as I walked a pathway cleaned of thievery and other dangers. And when I came to the garden, I looked to find him still beside me. Not the face I started out adoring, but a face that mirrored my surprise as to the journey's end. Okay, and the last one is called Where We Are Eaten. She stood alone in the grip of bare-knuckled moonlight as scorpions splintered their poisons from angry tails. She had been bitten before in the rough country of heat. The ticks that burrowed into her climbed out through her pores to watch the battle, where she lasted no more than the first assault upon her breast of hill. The bees that lost their stingers in the terrain were droning echoes of the charge that living, even in silk and caring, she must die of life's venom to be a banquet to waiting worms. Okay.
All right, thank you, Christine. Up next is a late edition Donna Wilhelm. We have no bio for her, so we're just going to make one up. Barbarian queen, never defeated in battle. She's used the blood of her enemies to write the following. Donna.
I love that. I'm going to use that. So actually, the one bit of bio is that I'm Chris Wilhelm's mom. So this doesn't have a title. In the spring of 1974, I was in 3rd grade and an avid Flyers fan. The Broad Street Bullies faced many foes to make it to the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Boston Bruins. I had but one adversary that year. She was large, mighty, and she meted out severe punishment to those who crossed her. Sister James Rita, my 3rd grade teacher. She was new to St. Charles the previous fall. She was short and wide, but to my smaller frame, she seemed ginormous. It was hard to tell her or any nun's age because of the habits they wore, but thinking back, I'd gauge her to be in her mid to late 20s, and she was already adept at what nuns do best, striking fear to the very cores of children in their charge. Sister had what today we would term as issues. She was especially hard on the boys who, in their previous 2 years at the school, had already earned reputations as troublemakers. Today we would call these boys normal. They were spirited and rambunctious. A lot of times they forgot things, ties, homework assignments, their way back from the lavatory. They were boys. She was odd in that she was the only teacher who mopped the floor of the classroom while we were in it during art class. I accidentally dropped a piece of yarn on the floor and she went ballistic, pulling on my hair until I felt my brain rattle. Meanwhile, the Flyers were on fire. My family tuned into every game that year. And back then, you could meet, get an autograph from, and have a picture taken with the likes of Orest Kinderchuk, Bernie Perron, and Rick McLeish at various stores and car dealerships in the tri-state area, free of charge. My sister and I did just that, and I remember the players being personable and gracious. On May 19th, the Flyers faced off against the Bruins in the 6th of a best out of 7 series. They had been up 3-2 and took the 6th game and the Stanley Cup by a final score of 1-0. The city went wild. The parade was scheduled for Tuesday, May 21st. Tuesday is popularly known as a school day, and the school strongly advised students not to go. My grandmother advised us we were going. And so it was that on the Tuesday after the win, my grandmother, who drove the neighborhood kids to school, did just that, -1. She saw no reason to lie about the fact that we were going to the parade. So naturally, this news made its way back to Sister Jane's Rita, and word on the playground was that the consequences for me would be dire. On Wednesday, when I returned to school, I was a nervous wreck, and my grandmother walked with me to line up with my class. Bobby Clark had gone head-to-head with John Busick. My grandmother was now going to head to have it with Sister Jane's Rita. They argued. Sister said that since I went to the parade, I had taken an unauthorized day off. You know, Graham said, Donna wasn't the only student in this school that went to the parade yesterday. This piqued Sister's interest. Who else, she asked. I'm not telling you, Graham said indignantly. I'm not a tattletale. Ooh, slap shot. Graham won, Sister zip. Sister, realizing this time she couldn't make an example of one student, backed down. And the next 3 weeks of the school year went by pretty quietly. The following school year, the Flyers again won the Stanley Cup. Sister James Rita did not return to St. Charles. 3rd grade had forced me to see things differently. That's the year I learned that sometimes you have to look at things from a completely different angle to see them clearly. Because the Broad Street bullies were actually a group of pretty nice guys, and the nun who was supposed to be our teacher and protector turned out to be the bully.
All right, thank you, Donna. Up next is Ella Remmings. She is a contributing writer to Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global and a published author. Native of Poland, Ella especially enjoys writing about people and places, from sleepy Polish villages to executive boardrooms of corporate America, along with the characters that inhabit them. She is currently working on a play and a collection of stories. Ella.
The Toothless Rebel. I had just lost my second baby tooth when I made the first decision to do something against the grain. I was attending a public preschool in Warsaw, Poland, where classes were large and teachers had a chip on their shoulder. Nobody wanted to be a preschool teacher. With paltry salaries and low prestige, teaching was viewed not as a choice, but as a fiasco for those who hadn't made it in the field that they desired. Out of revenge, they let everyone know how they felt about it for the rest of their careers. Still, they had their favorites. The quiet children who always listened and never rocked the boat. The ones with the cute dimples and curly blonde hair who giggled when pinched on the cheek. And the ones whose mommy or daddy occupied a prominent position in the Communist Party ladder. I was none of those. I liked to ask questions, which demanded teachers' attention. I was curious about things, mostly those not in the program. And the horror of horrors, I couldn't master apple peeling at the age of 5, like most of the other girls in preschool. What are you doing? You just cut off half the apple along with the skin. And I had to endure peeling lessons from the girl I wholeheartedly hated. I'm pretty sure it was the failed attempts at apple peeling that disqualified me from enrichment classes for the best behaved children. Either that or the wiggly baby tooth I pulled out during nap time. Was bloodstaining a preschool cot really such a terrible thing? Fact is, I was barred from taking part in an early writing class for insubordination. Perhaps, though, it was just what I needed to cement my contrarian spirit. I decided that, lessons or not, I was going to learn to write. While the good children went to their daily writing class, I stayed behind in the playroom with other tiny convicts. The boy who peed his pants for the 3rd time in a row, and the evil twin who bit his sister on the cheek. Perched in the corner, I pretended to draw, but I was actually copying letters from children's books onto children's books, for which I shortly got into trouble. With this learning plan busted and dismantled, my next idea was to ask my parents. There I encountered an unexpected obstacle. They felt I should wait until 1st grade to write, or I would be bored out of my mind in school. and they sent me back to playing with dolls and coloring within the lines. My parents might have felt this way about writing, but maybe Grandma didn't. Next time she came over to babysit, I got her to show me how to write her name, then mine, my brother's, and on it went. In the evenings, I would play teacher and copy words from books. By summer, I could write no worse than the good kids in preschool. Thus, at the age of 5, I learned several important lessons. Apple peeling was not my purpose in life. I could decide on something and make it happen, even if it meant going against the grain. If it didn't work the first time, it might work the second. And perhaps most importantly, being a rebel was not necessarily a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Up next, we have Faye Smith. She has always felt the best way she communicates personally is through writing. She discovered that she has some talent for writing when people began to ask her to write things for them, like toast, essays, and eulogies. Lately, she has been trying her hands at stories, mostly leaning towards children, but also adults. Stories inspired by her 95-year-old mother's ideas through the years. Faye.
This is a true story that was inspired by my mother. It's called the Hollow Log Cafe. Personally, I've never been to the Hollow Log Cafe. Apparently, there was one good stomping time to be had there. I used to think I could hear the tinkling of glasses, the roar of the laughter, into the late night hours. The Hollow Log Cafe was somewhere deep in the woods, a so-called club for cats. But other animals went there too. The cafe was only open at night. Cats are known to stay up all night. This is where my cat must have been when he would drag himself up the back lane with cuts and bruises and a torn ear. I cringed at the sight of him. I'd say to my mom, "What happened to Kitty? He's hurt." She'd say, "Well, he must have been down at that Hollow Log Cafe again." I'd say, "What's that?" She said, "It's a place where cats go to drink and dance and carry on all night." My young mind could not comprehend. I thought, my cat drinks? There's a club down in the woods where he goes. This seemed to happen with every cat I had. This occupied my mind for years. Come to think of it, Kitty did sleep all day and went out every night. Sometimes Kitty didn't even come home. Sometimes he'd be gone for days. My anxiety would grow with each passing day. I'd complain to my mom saying, "Where is the cat? He hasn't come home." She'd say, "He's probably hung over and sleeping it off somewhere." Again, my young mind could not comprehend. Hung over? My cat is hung over? I was so impressionable. I began to look at my cat in a different light and with suspicion. I questioned his character and his behavior. Let's see if I have this straight. My cat goes out at night, goes to a club in the woods, he drinks, flirts with girl cats, gets into fights and gets hurt. And sometimes he doesn't come home for days with no explanation. Then sleeps it, whatever it is, off all day. I decided I needed to do something to stop this madness and to protect my cat from his own reckless behavior. Kitty would simply not be allowed to go out at night. I made a hard and fast rule. Do not let the cat out. Anyone who let him out would have to answer to me. I stood guard at the door to make sure. My cat stood there too. After all, unbeknownst to me, all he or she wanted to do was go out and hunt mice.
One day, I even went in search of this flop house in the woods. The contour of the weeds and the branches could easily have been a cover for this house of ill repute. I never did find it. As I grew older, I realized there was no Hollow Log Cafe. Mom said they closed it down because things got so bad. What today is called a nuisance bar. The Hollow Log Cafe was a place my mom had made up to allay my worries and fears about why my cat came home beat up or hadn't come home at all. It gave me a place of reference. Kitty was okay. He was just out misbehaving. In fact, my mother didn't know where the cat was or where he had been. He could have been laying somewhere dead, hit by a car, caught in a trap, killed by a hunter, or worse yet, poisoned. She could never explain the violent nature of a cat's sex life that could end in the death of the loser to her little girl. The Hollow Log Cafe was real to me. Her story did serve to inform me what can happen to cats, later people, who drink. They stay out all night, they get into fights, get beat up, have hangovers, or go missing. My cat innocently went out to hunt and procreate. Even if a cat could drink, they wouldn't. When I got older, I found my own Hollow Log Cafe. But it was no whimsical club for woodland critters. Luckily, I never got into any fights or beat up or went missing, but it wasn't because I was a smart, cunning hunter. Maybe it helped me to know what went on down at that Hollow Log Cafe. Still, I wonder, could there really have been a Hollow Log Cafe? My mother went to great lengths to nurture my imagination as a child. I will be forever grateful to her for that. After all, what greater gift can a parent give their child than to nurture their imagination, allay their fears, and educate them about the world all at the same time?
All right, thank you, Faye. Up next, we have Gary Zenker. By day, he writes all sorts of marketing copy to convince people to buy things that they might not otherwise need. By night, he applies that talent to writing short stories in a variety of genre to shock, inspire, and entertain. Gary.
This story was featured on everydayfiction.com. Waiting. Why do guys die first, my friend Bob? Asked the new guy sitting on the bench. New guy looked up and squinted as the light was silhouetting Bob's and my standing figures from behind, probably offering a halo effect. I don't know. Why? Because they want to, Bob laughed. There was a moment of silence as new guy looked to his left and right. With no one in sight, he laughed hard as if it was the funniest joke he had ever heard. I laughed too. It could be the 50th time Bob has told me that joke, but I still laugh every time. Then they exchanged a silent look, as though they shared a secret. Beautiful view from here, new guy commented. Bob nodded. Been here long? No, I just got here last week. The wife, Bob asked. I need to check the schedule. Soon, I expect. Well, unless she makes a detour to play with old Henry, Bob smirked. New guy held a serious look for a second, then burst out laughing again. We don't know a Henry. Bob stared new guy in the eyes. Everyone knows a Henry. Sometimes his name is actually Henry. Sometimes it's Fred, or Tim, or Francois. I hate when they have French names. I don't think so. She's not like that, new guy replied. You never know. That's the one problem with leaving women alone. There's always a Henry. There was a point when I was a Henry. I remember me and the women from the club when the husbands were out working, ogling their secretaries. Ooh la la. I don't believe I have anything to worry about. New guy's tone turned terse. Stop goading him, I finally spoke up to diffuse the tension. Bob is a good friend, but sometimes he doesn't know where to draw the line. So what you gonna do today, I asked Bob, redirecting the conversation. Same thing I get to do every day. Smoke some cigars, play some golf. The landscaping on the golf course is really heavenly, Bob smiled, clearly pleased with himself. Want to join? He directed to New Guy. I never really played, New Guy offered in return. Not a problem, Bob said. We can teach you. You might get good before your wife joins you. It would fill the time. When are you expecting yours back? How long do you have? New Guy asked. 5 years, 2 months, and 4 days, Bob smiled. I checked the arrival schedule. Then, unexpectedly, a sudden sadness overcame him. The smile slid from his face as he looked down. His body slumped as he lightly kicked at the air. You can play a lot of golf in that time, New Guy offered. Bob lifted his head and a smaller smile returned to his face. Yep, plan to. Okay, I'm game. New Guy stood up. Which way to the course? Just to the left, past the second fluffy cloud.
All right, thank you, Gary. Up next is Julie Duffy. She is the host of Story a Day May Writing Challenge. Her article on digital distraction is in the upcoming issue of Writer's Digest magazine. And on Monday, April 16th, she'll be leading a writing workshop at the Mainline Writers Group, which you can find on meetup.com. Julie.
This is from a novel in progress, a murder mystery set in Scotland. Karen waved me over to the front desk. Jimmy wants to see you in his office. Our publisher? Hey, he's down from Glasgow. I looked around the newspaper offices as if they might have suddenly sprouted a new room. His office? Karen mimed taking a drink. Alex Barr. He'll be in the back room. The idea of meeting the legendary newspaper man sent my voice up an octave. When does he want to see me? With Jimmy? 5 minutes ago. In the pantheon of Dunochel's watering holes, Alex Barr stood alone. Alec was rumoured to have the richest, most expensive collection of fine spirits this side of Glasgow's West End. Rare Scotch whiskies, exotic liqueurs from Asia, brandies that Napoleon would have conquered a continent for. It wasn't obvious. When I walked through the heavy wooden door, it looked like any old grunter's bar. Low beams ran across the ceiling, a fruit machine lurked by the door promising big jackpots, and 3 small dirty windows let some accidental daylight leak onto the dark benches and tables. Most of the back wall was taken up with the bar, an old wooden affair with rounded edge polished smooth by generations of elbows. Behind it stood a wiry white-haired man polishing a glass. He showed no sign of having seen me come in, which was quite impressive, considering I was the only other human in the place. I walked right up to the bar, upon which the barman turned his back on me and discovered a spot on the shelf behind him that desperately needed cleaning. I cleared my throat. He didn't twitch. I said a cheery hiya, but either the barman was deaf or he was in fact the famed Alec of the bar's name, who was notorious for blanking people he didn't feel should be in his pub. I'd heard stories of all kinds of folks, from underage drinkers to peers of the realm, who'd been ignored by Alec and forced to slink out of the building and install themselves in some other pub in town. I'm here to see Jimmy, I said. Alec turned around. His eyes narrowed. You'll be the wee lassie from the paper then? My smile froze. Katrina McNaughton. Yes, I said, baring my teeth. The reporter? Alec glared at me. I raised one eyebrow and waited. You from round here, Alec said. Born and bred. I've not seen you in here before. Not been invited before. I was trying for the right mix of bravado and respect. We faced off for a moment longer and then, unexpectedly, Alec winked. Apparently I'd passed some kind of test. Aye, all right, he said. Jimmy's waiting for you. His sudden friendly grin was surprisingly hard to resist. It seemed I'd won access to the most prestigious pub in town. It almost made me forgive him for the wee lassie comment. He's in the back, keeping my supply of 25-year-old Macallan down to a manageable level. Very kind of him, I said. He's doing the Lord's work. Alec pushed open a swing door and ushered me into the snug. It was all red velvet benches and leather armchairs, prints on the wall depicting a fantasy of country life, fox hunting, and men in tweed sporting rifles. 2 wing chairs flanked the stone hearth. Jimmy Orr looked very much at home in one of them. His hair was thinning and his suit rumpled, but his eyes were as sharp as a spring wind off the sea. He had a small notebook in one hand and a tumbler in the other. "McNaughton, come away in. Can I get you anything?" Just a fresh orange and lemonade, please," I said. "For God's sake, woman," he said, "how'd you expect to get through a day like this on soft drinks?" I tried to look apologetic rather than terrified. Jimmy fixed me with a steely gaze, then dismissed Alec with a shrug. "You do drink, though?" I nodded. Just a bit early for me," I said. "Give it time. Few years from now, you'll be able to have a proper breakfast like the rest of us." I searched his face, trying to divine the correct response. "I'm just having yawn," he wheezed, and gestured to the free chair. Ordinarily, this would be a wee bit early for me too, but he waved his hand as if to communicate the very not ordinary nature of hearing that your ex-wife's been murdered. He gave me a meaningful look. Ordinarily, I wouldn't trust a person who'll no oblige me by having a drink with me. "Oh, get me on the right night and I can be very obliging," I said, cringing as I heard the words come out of my mouth. "I wouldn't advertise that, Hen," he said, leaning in. "Men are scum, I should know."
Thank you, Julie. Up next, we have another member of our Phoenixville Writers Group, Carolyn Morris. She has an MFA from Lesley University. It's been published in The Flexible Persona, Body Parts, and Shimmer. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart and named as honorable mention on Ellen Datlow's Best of the Year Horror Anthology. Carolyn.
Hi everybody. I'm going to be reading a story from the Flexible Persona that Eric mentioned. This was actually the one that was nominated for the Pushcart, so that's fun. This is called Light Undimmed Bodies. At night, I creep out of bed to look at him. My husband is where I left him, in the kitchen chair by the living room wall. His hands rest in his lap, palms down on his thighs. His face is empty. I crouch in front of him, send one tentative finger to test his cheek. Is it warm or cold? But his chest rises and falls and my finger halts, because it doesn't matter if he's warm or cold. It doesn't matter if he's breathing. My husband is dead. In the morning, Selma comes to check him out. When she opens the door, the sun streams into the house and shines on Dick, where he's immobilized on his chair, and my heart jumps. When she closes it, everything stills again. Our tiny house has always been dim. I never wash the windows, and I keep the curtains drawn. Now, I don't want people coming by and seeing him. Before, I didn't want people coming by and seeing me. Selma stands before him for a few minutes, her palms denting her wide, flabby hips. She cocks her head. On his chair, Dick doesn't respond. Normally, he would make a crack about her tiny hands and her large ass, but his body only hangs there. "You're right," says Selma. "This ain't him, but it sure is weird to look at." Her hand snaps out and slaps him across the face. He rocks back and forth on the chair, but otherwise doesn't move. She isn't strong enough to knock him over. "I always wanted to do that," she says. "Don't do it again, okay? Because I'm still here." Selma shrugs big, her heavy shoulders heaving, her breasts up and down. "Sure thing, but it ain't like I slapped you," she says. "Where'd he go, do you think?" "His mind, maybe," says Selma. "Or maybe he just poofed away. I never really thought there was much there to begin with, to be honest." She reaches out to prod his face again, but catches sight of me and stops herself. "He checked his pulse and his breathing and all that?" I nod. "He's still warm, heart still beating. It's just, he's a body now and not a man. What am I supposed to do now that he's gone?" Selma shrugs again. Every time she does this, I get the willies. She's got so much to her body. It makes me uncomfortable watching it all go. "Find another?" "Selma, I ain't like you. I can't just go around replacing one with the next with the next. I liked this one. He was supposed to stick around." "Technically, he hasn't gone anywhere. Maybe you can list him with a medical condition or something. Get some money for him. Buy a new front door. Your lock sticks." "Who's gonna put the door in?" I ask. "I'll send my guy over. He can help." "I'd rather have mine." Selma sweeps her arm out like she's throwing candies at a parade, and I watch the fat on her arms jiggle. God, I never want to be that fat. He's right here, baby cakes. That's
All right, thank you. Tiny. Thank you, Carolyn. Up next is Lena Fey. She was born in St. Petersburg, formerly Leningrad, Russia. She started reading very early, and by age 8, she had read all of the Sherlock Holmes stories and many others. She became interested in literature and writing by middle school. Her stories are a reflection of her crazy life as a professional scientist, genetic engineer, and a single parent of 2 teens. Her stories are also a reflection of her upbringing as a child of parents who lived through the 900 days of blockade and starvation of Leningrad during World War II, evacuation, and the following horrible years of Stalin's repressions. Lena.
I'm actually, for a change, gonna read poetry tonight. I do write short stories as well, and I wanted to ask you one thing. I actually translate my own poetry, but if you would like to listen to that in Russian, I can do it too. I can read to you in Russian and then translate, or I can read to you in English, and if you're interested, after I can read you in Russian. So, because I'm not sure, and I just want to make one comment, because I went translating my poem today. I realized that I was doing it with my daughter, who is 17, and she was helping me to translate. I realized that it became totally different things. So it's translated from Russian into English and became something else. Even so, it's a translation. So, but it's just I can read you one in Russian and then in English, so you can see the difference in dynamics of the language also. Well, some of us can understand both languages. I'll start with English. Metaphorical pain. Pain is like a musical album, a song. One of the songs is Screamer. Pain is when nobody understands you. You are speaking different languages, and in your eyes is an endless emptiness. Pain is when there is no trust among your loved ones. The world is crashing down, and there are no more normalities. The lifeboat is shaking. I am nauseous all the time. I am throwing up. I physically feel the disgust. This is pain. One must live through the pain. I'm meditating. The pain will go away. We are going to speak Esperanto. It will be a language of love. I'm learning the language of love. I am painting my artworks. I'm sculpting with clay. I'm writing poems and short stories. I am studying my pain. It's not just my pain anymore. I am recognizing other sick people. We are sharing to reduce the pain. And the music is not screaming any longer. There are musical notes. The language has lots of words, and those words the child can understand. I believe in life and kindness. I have a soul. I am learning to walk on the hot coal of life. So I read you in Russian. Боль и образы. Боль — это песня, а в ней музыка режет металлом. Боль, когда тебя не понимают. Вы говорите на разных языках, а в глазах бесконечная пустота. Боль, когда не веришь самому близкому для тебя человеку. Мир проваливается, уже нет норм. Качается корабль жизни в шторм. Все время тошнит, выворачивая наизнанку, физически ощущаешь грязь. Это боль. Эту боль нужно пережить. Медитируешь, она пройдет. Мы будем говорить на эсперанто, это будет язык любви. Я учу язык любви. Рисую картины, леплю из пластилина, пишу стихи и рассказы. Я изучаю свою боль. Она уже не столько моя, я узнаю о других больных, мы говорим, уменьшая и осознавая эту боль. Теперь музыка не режет по-живому. У музыки есть ноты, у языка появились слова, которые понимает ребенок. Я верю в жизнь и доброту. У меня есть душа. Я учусь ходить по горячим углям жизни. Я не знаю, как это... Thank you very much. So this is a short poem. I'm from St. Petersburg, and so much is related inside of me to this city. So I wrote like a short poem about St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg. This city will stay in our poems forever. It will stay in our dreams. My memory will not disappear abroad despite my immigration. I will remain your soul, your heart, your memory forever. My beautiful city on the Neva River, my so familiar city, my faraway soldier, my dearest summer garden. So just to explain the summer garden, it's one of the most beautiful gardens in the city, and it was designed by Tsar in Russia. And the city was a capital for over 200 years and built like a European city and still remains the same. It did change names 4 times around. So it was St. Petersburg, became Petrograd and Leningrad, and now in St. Petersburg again.
All right, thank you, Lena. Up next, we have Monty Milne. He is a poet who hails from the blue skies and still waters of Port Providence, Pennsylvania. He is a creative soul who lives a creative life. He published 6 books of poetry and prose in 2017 that contain almost all of his poetry and prose written from 1987 to the present. His current writing project is an epic poetic novel. Think Led Zeppelin meets the Inferno. Monty.
I'm gonna actually have a website. It's tiltedpoet.com if anybody's interested in checking out some of my stuff later. I'm just gonna read a couple of my random poems tonight. This is a poem about rebirth. It's called Footprints of My Soul. I've got to start again the hunt for my soul, left somewhere in the singing colors, forests of my mind. It is springtime again. Gray sparrows, red robins carry thoughts, dream clouds decorate the powdery blue sky. The slurping brook, green moss banks where doom once lay. Glorious springtime, track footprints of my soul through golden wisps of meadowed hills to that same damning fork in the path. See footprints of my soul trekking down cold winter nights. A frozen life, bleak icicles on dark barren oak trees. The beating heart of the yellow sun of my mind shines warmth, a season to grow. Leading the feet of my soul freshly down unexperienced silver trails, with conception and ascension, I orchestrate the reformation, reborn embryo of my soul. This is called Idea. Interior imagery corralled in flesh and skull, elaborately magnificent, whether horror or beauty. Infant voyager as it slithers out, through hands, eyes, voice, reaction, transforming through spectacular stages, radiating to a diverse completion. This is called Yummy in the Tummy. After trapping their game with keen wit, they tied their kill to the wooden spit. Round and round it turned to bake, mouths watered at the fleshy cake. The men were eager to take a bite. Well, women and children dressed in white cooled the roast with a thatched fan, then carved out pieces of the well-done man. This is a poem called Great White. Dark, unblinking eyes with a subtle hint of mania guide the great white killer. He swims alone, undetected, without remorse or regret in his gaping smile. The ocean metropolis crawls with noisy street vendors, pedestrians, and large, powerful automobiles. A school of young float by. The elementary students follow their teacher's signal and shy away from his path. His only natural enemy bobs in a vacant alley, waiting for a nibble. The rumpled black coat and soiled blue dungarees hide the badge and gun. He is careful not to take the bait and get hooked and gaffed into handcuffs. The smell of prey fills his nostrils as he drifts further downstream. The country-scented mermaid is exposed like a wound, a confused tourist caught in a bustling undertow of people. For the third time this week, he circles his victim, patiently waiting for the feeding frenzy to begin. This one is called Help. Akam's razor cut better than gravity's saw. The problem was a small one. A tiny pink karma was engulfed by a mammoth purple specter. Gravity tried to slice the specter into little itty-bitty pieces. Akam simply pushed straight in and carved the little karma out. It's what I kind of call philosophical poetry. And then I've got just one more little page here of a couple little quick poems that I did. You are the lovebird that sings in my soul, the one true masterpiece I sought to paint, a living poem I could not capture with words. This is reminds me of our Boston Terrier. I didn't write her about her, but we like our little puppy. Happy lappy puppy, enter my home, so curious by day and faithful at night, I have earned the right to walk by your side. Try that again. The book and pen feels good in my lap, especially confined in a cell with my thoughts. To correspond with my feelings is a wonderful thing. To write crap is as bad as stepping in it. And then I will leave you with this last one. Maybe I should have ended it on that one. A milestone of hard work at the end of each passing day paves the smooth highway to the rest of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Monty. Up next is Paul. I think someone has turned this off. Okay. Up next is Paul Celentano. He's worked as a technician, as Mark breaks the camera.
Yeah, really. Whoa. Why are you blurry there, Eric? Oh, here we go.
Just blurry naturally. Technical difficulties. Bear with us, folks.
We're hello, testing. Hello, hello. What happened? Where'd we go? Hello, can we tell? Wow.
What did you do?
If bad sound was fatal, audio would be the leading cause of death.
There we go. Now we're back. Okay.
Oh, there's a shock, turning it off and turning it back on again. All right, let's try this again. Still not working, but that's cool. It'll live.
Yep.
Paul Celentano has worked as a technician for a fire alarm company for 26 years until he was fired for refusing to falsify the documentation of fire alarm inspection reports. Good
for you.
He later worked for another fire alarm company, again as a technician, and worked at an NMEP firm as a fire alarm designer.
Fire Alarms Kill People is a collection of stories from his days as a fire alarm technician. The book should be finished by the end of April. Paul.
See, well, that was pretty much a bio of me, I guess, and I came up with the title because of my experiences whereby I would be in buildings where the alarms would be ringing and nobody would leave. So there's a bunch of chapters. This one's called On Call, and it's made up of several stories, which you'll just hear one about what it's like to be when you're on call. Anything can happen when on call. Can you hear me? All right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. On call is the condition in which the fire alarm technician finds him or herself at the mercy of an incoming phone call. When on call at Simplex, we are expected to perform our normal duties throughout the day and take emergency calls on evenings and weekends, generally for about a week long. If our phone rang and we could not answer it, we had to return the call within 15 minutes or risk serious reprimands, including dismissal. We were paid overtime for the service calls performed, as well as an extra $110 for the week for the extra effort it took to remain sober. This is a collection of stories. This chapter is a collection of stories from my days in the field as an on-call fire alarm technician. Every other technician has similar stories, and as such, you'd find these both entertaining and informative. This is the cover of the book. I drew this years before I had the idea of writing it, and that's my house on fire, and my children not doing what they're supposed to be doing when I yell at them to get out. It never happened. It's just fully fictional. And by the way, these stories are embellished nonfiction. Let's see. So, it was a 4th of July holiday weekend. It was just after 9/11, around 2002, I think it was, actually. And we were on one of those purple alerts or something, and everybody was on edge, and every time I go to a building, they just had to have their fire alarm system working just right. So, moving on to the, I'm going to pick up in the middle of the story. So by this time, it was getting pretty late in the day, and I took another call somewhere way deep in South New Jersey, only to have it canceled before I got there. I bought a can of nuts at a Rite Aid, and I called it dinner. Eventually, I found myself heading westbound out of Philadelphia around 11 p.m. It had been an exceptionally busy holiday weekend of service calls, and there was not a bridge on the Delaware River I had not crossed at least once. And then my phone rang again. My instructions: go back to Jersey, there's been a flood. Meanwhile, on the westbound Schuylkill Expressway, I exited at Gulf Mills and headed east across the Delaware River again, and found my way to the Woodbury Mews Assisted Living Home in Woodbury, New Jersey. The Woodbury Mews was not scheduled to open until September or so. This was around July. And I was in fact the technician assigned to commission the fire alarm system being installed there. The installation had been going well, but unfortunately, a sprinkler pipe had burst tonight on the 4th floor. And as water flows downhill, so did the condition of the building, as the flowing water damaged walls, floors, ceilings, carpets, furniture, computers, and of course, the fire alarm system. I met the electrician around 11:30. We got the Simplex 4010 panel. We found the Simplex 4010 panel in the basement, surrounded by arched ceilings made of red clay brick. This was the original part of the building and very old. The new addition was, of course, modern construction, complete with elevators. The 4010 was in dire straits with all kinds of troubles coming and going. As soon as I would acknowledge and silence one trouble, another trouble would pop up, and upon its reset, the first trouble would reappear. It was another classic case of whack-a-mole. I was able to pin down the one consistent troublemaker, a heat detector in the elevator control room. Being an addressable system, if an addressable device became wet, it would lose its mind. These addressable devices are what they call smart devices now. It would spit out erroneous info garbage and drive the rest of the system stark raving mad. To get the system to settle down enough to be properly diagnosed, I would have to remove this troublemaker from the system. Like I said, it was getting late, and I was really getting tired, and I was getting stupid too. The electrician and I were walking down the dark carpeted hallway on our way to the elevator machine room. The lights were out, and the carpets were sopping wet. Aware of the fact that we were in a building with water-damaged electrical systems, I was also a bit nervous. Then, bang! I did a jump 180, turned towards the direction of the sudden noise, and glanced up at the electrician, who calmly smiled. That's just another wet ceiling tile hitting the floor. We found the elevator machine room with its water-damaged heat detector still wearing its dust cover. The fire alarm system was not yet officially in service, and the dust covers were still in place. The dust cover was filled with water, essentially drowning the heat detector face down in the cover. I reached up to remove the dust cover with the intention of then removing the heat detector, and then I stopped. "It's time for me to go home," I said. "What?" said the electrician. "Yep," I said. "It's getting late, I'm getting tired, and I'm getting stupid. That heat detector is wired up to shut down the elevator in the event of an alarm. The elevator runs on 480 volts, and I'm standing on a wet concrete floor reaching up to grab a wet heat detector wired into the 480 volts. It's time to go home." The electrician agreed. Besides, the system was a mess, and there was not much we could have done. Time to condemn the system, shut down the building, and call the insurance adjusters. Anything can happen on call, and anything almost did. Woodbury Muse delayed its opening for another 6 months and opened up in the spring. And if you're wondering how safe you are in this building, where's that thing? That one right there? That belongs in a museum. That's a paper right there.
All right, thank you, Paul. I don't know why I keep talking to this microphone.
It just looks better.
Rich Wilhelm is a writer, cemetery tour guide, and notebook maker who lives in Phoenixville with his wife Donna, sons Jimmy and Chris, and dogs Joe Lee. Rich.
Thank you. Just to provide a slight bit of context, I'm going to read a poem tonight, and this poem is based on this photo, which I took. This photo was taken at 29th Street and 29th and Diamond in Philadelphia. This was taken during the nor'easter on March 2nd. I was at 29th and Diamond at about 5:30. About 7 o'clock, I was 2 miles away in front of Laurel Hill Cemetery. My son and I spent quite a while on Ridge Avenue that night. This poem and this photo came from it, so it's okay. This poem is called Coltrane in the Nor'easter. Coltrane in the Nor'easter gazes over the old neighborhood from his vantage point at 29th and Diamond. Coltrane in the Nor'easter recalls struggle and triumph in his house on 33rd, now with a sign noting his long ago presence. Coltrane in the Nor'easter is poised to play his saxophone, but his lips never touch the instrument. Coltrane in the Nor'easter remembers the nearby long-lost jazz clubs where he honed his craft. The 820 Club, Cafe Society, Crystal Ball, the Web Bar, Sunray, Blue Note. Coltrane in the Nor'easter meditates on after-hours sessions at the Woodbine with Tyner, Pope, Ollie, Smith, Morgan, Golson, and Philly Joe Jones. Coltrane in the Nor'easter knows his sheets of sound would rage wild and free amid these sheets of snow, and yet his lips never touch the instrument. Coltrane in the Nor'easter has never heard of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Trump. And even if he had, his mind would be elsewhere. Coltrane in the Nor'easter might wonder why everyone, from Bono to Sheryl Crow to some guy in Phoenixville, feels the need to invoke his name. Coltrane in the Nor'easter could impart great wisdom to the father and son talking Kanye and Kendrick in the car below him. Coltrane in the Nor'easter is one of my favorite things. Coltrane in the Nor'easter prays that each of us will someday encounter a love supreme.
Thank you, Rich. We're just going to turn this off so we don't get the percussion going on. Up next is Sean Chambers. He has an MFA in creative writing and is an assistant professor of English language and literature at Valley Forge Military College in Wayne. There, he's an artistic director of the Soldiers Theater Career Planning and Placement Exploration Club for undergraduates interested in the entertainment industry. After interning at Spike Lee's 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks and Music Works company, he was the dramaturg for actor Sean Patrick Thomas's senior MFA project at NYU. Professor Chambers writes poetry, scripts, and memoir, and speaks often about cross-racial collaboration and lessons from his own background as a 1980s music lover, film buff, and father raising his daughter in the northeastern urban areas, quite different from his own upbringing in southeastern Virginia and his college years in Charlottesville, Virginia. He writes and speaks frequently about getting middle school black boys on track to take advanced placement high school classes in both his fiction and his nonfiction. Professor Chambers.
Hello, everybody. This is young adult fiction. In line, waiting my turn to get off the yellow bus, I reached out my hand and did it. I reached around Jerry till my hand could touch Bird's butt. She turned, ready to smash Jerry in the mouth. Jerry said, "Think twice. Wasn't me, witch." Jerry said more. He said he gonna touch the switch of the witch bird. Bird's eyes met mine, and she knew he wasn't lying. I was the one who had done it. Jerry looked at me. "That's your life, son." All the kids exited the yellow bus. Bird spit on the back of her left hand and then wiped the loogie on her stone-washed jeans. I dug that weird mess as much as the sway of her hips when she walked. But it also scared me. I was drawn to her and repulsed at the same time. Instincts kicked in. Run. Fast. Just book. Booking, where I was from, meant running like the cops were on your tail. Like Mrs. Harris's German Shepherd was about to break her chain and clamp on your butt. To book was to outrun any and everybody so you could escape. Escape what? Mama's beating? Worse, daddy's swats? Booking meant hopping that fence or trucking across that field. It wasn't the same as racing. It wasn't the same as racing one of the Perry kids, although any one of those 14 brothers and sisters could also book. Booking was running from danger, running for your escape across the tracks, maybe behind Stewart Gardens projects even, if that's what it took. Booking meant walking somebody down, but passing them, not chasing them. Trucking and chasing, those were racing words, competition words, words among friends. Space. Booking meant somebody was mad and somebody else was afraid. When booking stopped, confrontation began. Fast, fearful, eye to eye. No more running because your character was on the line now. To run all the time wasn't shameful. Hey, everybody, every person knew that sometimes a brother gotta run. You better run, you better book. To fight though, well, you can't back down when the fight is right in your face, especially if it's the second time it's right in your face. You have to stop and put up your dukes and do the best that you can do. Can't ask about whether you're gonna die in the fight. If your life is on the line, you'd already have been killed by this one who's chasing you. You'd already be dead. Booking over, booking done. Caught or tired, or caught from being tired and out of gas or out of fear. Either way, right now, time to draw. All the kids circled around the pair of us to see who'd throw the first blow. Was it gonna be like a boxing match between Ali and Frazier, or like a wrestling match between Ric Flair and Wahoo McDaniel? Who's gonna jack who up, kids were wondering. Just because you booked didn't mean necessarily you wanted to lose the fight. Different things. Looking around the circle, I was more embarrassed by the fact that she was such a quick girl. And then I became angry because her eyes looked hurt. Started to run, and she had walked me down, only to reveal that she was going to hit me, but wasn't going to hit me out of any sense of joy or any sense of just loving to knock a boy in the mouth. No, she was hurt. She liked me. I was supposed to be different, or had been until the day 5 minutes ago. Again, looking was fine and chasing was okay, but her eyes said, why? Why do you, of all people, have to say, bird witch, bird witch? You. So sock, right dead in the eye. Just once, just the once. She didn't have to stop. She knew how to wail on somebody, sure as I knew how to book. She didn't want to wail on me, just to hit me once real good, just to show me how mad she was because I had reached for her bottom in front of the guys at the afternoon on the bus because I gave in to a dare from some guys earlier that day. Her face almost said, I would have let you, but not all out in front of everybody like some. But that wasn't the reason I decided I wasn't going to hit her back. There was just no way I was going to hit her back. It wasn't entirely because she could whoop my butt. I was willing to be called a lot of things. I was a lot of things, but I was not going to hit a girl. I wasn't going out like that. Not the kid. Not the kid.
All right, thank you, Sean. All right, finally we have Shannon O'Shea. She's another one of our members of the Phoenix Fiction Writers. She writes literary fantasy with an emphasis on fairy tale and folklore. She has recently been published in The Flexible Persona. So, Shannon.
This is the opening scene from a new untitled novel in progress. I don't really have a lot of time, Caden said. Are you sure this is the place? They were huddled in the dark of the back office, facing the wall. The only light came from the street outside. The dull, scratched wood floors vibrated with bass. It made the glass in the window rattle occasionally, and the candy jar, and the photos on the bookshelf behind him. Maybe alive, the girl could have passed for older, wiser, but in death all pretenses had been stripped bare. Skinny shoulders, knobbly knees, stark collarbone, tiny frame, too much eyeliner, once war paint, now a memorial. It had fallen to accentuate the shadows under her bulbous eyes. She had died in a gothy sort of corset, covered in buckles. The breezy tunic sleeves had been torn away to expose her shoulders. Probably the early aughts, Caden thought, an Evanescence wannabe masquerading as punk. But he didn't say that. Yes, I'm sure, the girl said. It's me back there. I can feel it. Are you going to help me or not? Energy coalesced around her. The temperature dropped a few degrees. The static lit against his skin. The papers behind her on the desk began to rustle. I said I would. Caden turned away from her, looked around. In the corner, by the door, the ghost of his dead brother Finn lingered, barely visible. It was cold in that corner, too, but it was always cold when Finn was around. Finally, he noticed something, some kind of stupid trophy, a heavy glass pyramid thing pointed on a marble-looking base. That would work. What do you think? Said Caden, glancing back to where Finn waited. It's probably behind the mirror, right? Shit like this is always behind the mirror, or like obnoxious oil paintings. Always, said Finn. His voice, like it always did, these past years since he had passed, his voice grated. It made Caden's hair stand on end. It made him want to check his back for spiders. Okay, Scooby-Doo, you're the big expert here. Dude, shut up. What else do I have to go on? Suddenly, the mirror shot across the room and shattered against the opposite wall. Caden spun around reflexively, holding the trophy in front of him like a weapon. The girl was still standing there, stringy hair floating everywhere, and wow, she was glowing now. That was new. Why had Finn never glowed? He was pissed off all the time. There, she said, no mirror. Are you going to do it or not? Downstairs, the bass suddenly cut out, and the audience screamed. He was almost out of time. Finn, he said, do you know how? I'm not here to help you. His voice was cold, monotone, resentful. Caden could barely remember what it sounded like anymore when Finn was alive and happy to see him, even when he dreamed about the old times, Christmas mornings, church bazaars, late-night cigarette runs. He couldn't quite recreate the old tone, just this one. Caden sighed. Right, I knew that. He glanced at the girl. She was standing there again, just like before, expressionless but fierce, chin tilted down, eyes pointed. He took 2 small steps forward and stopped where the mirror had previously hung. The silence, without the buzz of the bass and the walls and the floor, felt yawning. His footfalls felt louder than they were. Then he waited. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just when he expected it, the next song kicked up. Loud, booming, it came in waves. The windows rattled. He raised the trophy, cupped it in both hands, and blanketed by the din of the first opener downstairs, beat a hole in the drywall. Dust got everywhere, all down his front, stark against his black clothes. But then he saw it, an old cigar box, just as described, perched on a wooden beam, worn gilded edges. It was wedged in there sort of tight, but he pulled it out without much trouble. And inside, well, you can't let him get away with it. Her jaw clenched as she spoke. He could see the bones of her throat flex as she gulped. It was a strangely alive gesture of nerves for a dead girl. I won't. You promised. Caden turned to face her, looked at her dark, hollow eyes, the faint bruising around her neck, her tangled hair, her bloodless lips, and the way, if he focused just so, she became translucent. He could almost imagine it, a huge presence in a tiny frame, screaming her vocals into the mic just to kill. Little goth girls in the audience emulating her, singing back. And then, the show over, coming upstairs and staying here forever. I promise I'll take care of it, he said again. The guy's still here. I can't just... He waved vaguely. But I have to go, seriously, or someone will come looking. Fine. The cold abated. But I'll drag your pathetic soul out your nose and torture you for eternity if you don't follow through. Then she vanished, slow and quick at the same time, like her atoms had been carried off by a non-existent breeze. Caden turned to meet Finn's eyes, but found himself alone. Tucking the cigar box a little tighter under his arm, he strode purposefully out of the room. The door snapped shut behind him of his own volition, and he only paused in his stride, but didn't turn back. The stairwell back to the green room was lit harshly, with fluorescent lights that buzzed. Chatter from the backstage, music from the hall, it all echoed in the tinny space. The din was familiar and weirdly comforting. It felt like returning to the world. Halfway down, there was a landing before the steps turned. As the soles of his shoes touched it, he felt a presence behind him and heard his little brother's voice in his ear. Try not to screw up this time. When his brother was alive, he would have felt a puff of breath against the shell of his ear. But since he wasn't, he only reflexively imagined one, and the dissonance made him shudder. Caden was used to that. And anyway, he had a show to do.
Thank you, Shannon. That is everyone for the evening. Unless I've missed someone, speak up now, forever hold your peace. Going once, going twice, sold. Alright, so once again, we are the Phoenix Fiction Writers. We meet the second Thursday and third Tuesday of the month. There should be some flyers back there, as well as some cookies and books. Help yourself to all of them. Please pay for the books. Alright, have a good night.
Thank you.